Have you ever walked away from your faith knowing someday you would come back to it? Maybe someday after you were all done having all of that fun. Have you ever gone somewhere that you knew was really, really bad for you, but you went anyway? Have you ever made a decision that hurt pretty much everyone around you? Have you moved somewhere that you never even prayed about and then realized that that move was the cause of so much hardship in your life? If so, today's lesson is for you. Today we are continuing in the book of Genesis with Jacob's storyline. All right, good morning. Welcome to our Genesis series. Glad you're joining us. Also, if you are in Phoenix, Arizona, or in the vicinity, you're welcome to always join us on Wednesday mornings at Rio Vista Rec Center. We would love to have you. If not, we're glad you're joining us online. Any way you found us, online apps, Roku, YouTube, you can watch us. We always say anytime, anywhere. How's that? We are working through the book of Genesis. Today we are going to see Jacob and Esau, the twin brothers, finally meet after 20 years. Esau, 20 years ago, wanted to kill Jacob, all right? Now, Jacob is actually the grandson of Abraham. So Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has twin boys, Jacob and Esau. But Jacob kind of lied and deceived his father and stole his brother's not only birthright earlier, but his blessing. Esau is furious about this, so he says he's going to kill his brother Jacob. So Jacob goes on the run, all right? He goes on the run up 400 miles north to his mother's brother, so his uncle's house. And now it's been 20 years. And Jacob knows God has promised him this land that his father and his grandfather lived on, that many, many descendants would come from Jacob, and that God would bless actually the world through Jacob's descendants. One of the descendants being, of course, we know Jesus himself. So that's the lineage that comes from Jacob. But at the time now, Jacob is moving back home. It's been 20 years, but at this point he has 2 wives, a couple baby mamas along there. He's got 11 boys, 1 daughter, and he's heading down here. I'm going to put a map up here so you can see. You can see at the very, very bottom, the line to the left is Beersheba. That's where he started out 20 years ago. Now he went all the way up to Haran. That's where he's been living. Now he's coming back, the right red line. He's coming back down. But he also, if you go straight down, you'll see it says Seir or Edom. That whole area is his brother Esau's land. So Jacob knows he's going to be passing right by his brother's land, okay? And Jacob does some really stupid stuff, and I'll explain it with a joke. How's that? Let's start here. I'm going to assume that one of Jacob's wives, Leah, is going to feel like this woman. There was a woman who was very, very angry with her husband, and so they were having problems. So they each decided to give each other the silent treatment, okay? So the problem is this has been going on for a week. And the husband finally realized that he needed his wife to wake him up at 5 a.m. You know, he had a hard time waking up by alarm clocks. Nothing worked. So she would literally physically have to wake him up. But he didn't want to break the silence, you know, because then she would win. And so he wrote a note and he gave it to her, and he said, look, please wake me up at 5 a.m. in the morning. And so the next morning, the man woke up to discover it was 9 a.m. and he missed his flight to Chicago. And he was so angry. He was getting ready to go out to tell his wife, you know, what's wrong with you, when he noticed a piece of paper laying by his bed. And she wrote on the paper and said, it's 5 a.m., wake up. Therefore, don't be in silent treatments with your spouse. There you go. So we'll see that as angry as this woman was, this is how Leah, one of Jacob's wife, would feel as we get going into the story. Now, what is shocking about Jacob, and I don't know why it is shocking, and it should be, is that we saw last week that Jacob, God steps out of heaven, has a wrestling match with Jacob, okay? But but it didn't really matter. Like Jacob still, even meeting face to face with God, it doesn't seem to have a huge impact on his life. And we'll see this as he will hurt his wife, he'll hurt his maids, he'll hurt his children, all because he just doesn't know how to trust God. And it's very, very sad. So last week we saw that at the end of this wrestling match that God put Jacob's hip out of his socket. And I said most likely as a form of discipline. Like, Jacob, listen to me. If I put your hip out, you're always going to be limping. Every time you limp, hopefully you'll remember me. But what we talked about over the last couple weeks is sometimes God has to do something drastic to get our attention, not because he hates us, but because he loves us. And he really, really desperately wants us to change, to trust him more, to put everything upon him and not take things on ourselves. So I want to talk about this for a second this morning, this whole idea of discipline, because, God did something pretty drastic to Jacob to get his attention. And sometimes God disciplines us. Now, Chuck Swindoll wrote a book called Clinging to Hope. And in the book, he talks about two different kinds of discipline. One is constructive discipline, and one is corrective discipline. So I want to talk about this one first, this constructive discipline, because this is something we want in our life. This is a discipline that actually promotes spiritual growth in our life. It's something that we do, but we do it and it takes effort. It takes time. It takes doing something. Like, if I want to grow in my faith, I need to discipline myself to wake up early and read my Bible, study the Bible. Like, that takes discipline. And that's not always easy, especially if you have to wake up early and have to go to work early. Like, you may have to read at nighttime or what, but it's something you carve out of your day. It's a discipline. It might mean disciplining yourself to wake up on Wednesday mornings to, get out of bed and come to Bible study. I mean, I don't know. It might mean waking up early and getting your family to church on Sundays. And if you have kids, that's really difficult. And I get it. It's going to take discipline to do that. So I found a really funny Skit Guys video, and you'll have to watch this, about getting our kids up early and actually making it to church. Watch this.
Here you go.
Kids, wake up, it's Sunday, we gotta get ready for church. Brian, wake up, honey. Brian, get up. What? Okay, I'm gonna hop in the shower real quick. You get the kids ready, and then we'll get going,
No.
okay?
Hey,
What?
you just lay out their clothes, because it takes me 5 minutes.
Honey.
That's perfect.
Seriously.
Jack. Well, we're already late for church.
Hey,
Go
Brian,
get yourself dressed.
did you pick up my stuff from the dry cleaners?
Ooh.
Make it, break it. Make it, break it. Make it, break it.
Okay, Jack. I'm gonna make you waffles.
Can I have a sandwich?
Yes, but you gotta make it by yourself. Jack. Okay.
This is all I could find, and the zipper's broken.
All right. I'll go grab a safety pin.
I got the high score!
Make it, break it. Make it, break it.
Hannah, what are you doing?
Daddy, I'm painting your fingernails.
Well, that's great, sweetie, but go get dressed.
I need you to stay still. Okay, honey. Hannah!
Come on, let's go.
Everybody needs to eat. Here you go.
I need one.
Here you go. Okay, here you go.
I forgot my shoes.
Honey, we gotta go back.
Here you go.
I want to take off my shoes.
Nobody's taking off their shoes. And I want everybody to understand that when we're what?
We made it.
Yep.
Okay, so these are like constructive disciplines that we all need in our life to actually grow up spiritually. Chuck Swindoll said this. He said, when he thinks of constructive discipline, it reminds him of Tom Landry, the late coach of Dallas Cowboys. He said, Chuck asked Tom Landry one day, he said, how are you able to forge a team with a bunch of strong-willed, independent men? Like, how do you do it? Because you guys won so much during the 29 seasons that Coach Landry was their coach. And what is the key to that? And Tom Landry said this: the key is discipline, this constructive discipline. He said the key is discipline, which is this: to get men to do what they don't want to do in order to achieve what they've always wanted to accomplish in their lives. Coach Landry worked his team hard. He drilled them mercilessly, but the goal was to build his team up and equip them. And that's what these spiritual disciplines do for us. It builds us up. Yeah, it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. Yeah, it's hard to go to church or go to Bible study or small group or whatever, but it's something that they did to build up what we need to do to build up our faith. Which is why I'm just so proud of those of you that are actually, watching Bible study every week or making sure you're reading your Bible every day. Some of you are reading really good Christian books. And we really promote that, making sure that you read books that will help you, biographies of people who persevered to the end with their faith. This made me laugh about books. A blonde walks into the library, slams the book down on the countertop and yells at the librarian, "This is the worst book I've ever read. It has no plot and it has way too many characters." The librarian looked at her calmly and responds, here's a picture. "Thank you so much for returning our phone book." We wondered where that went to. There you go. So read something other than the phone book. There you go. I realized too that in this generation, I just asked my granddaughter yesterday, I'm like, do you know what a phone book is? Because this generation has no idea what that even, what that is. That was something that's what we used to, like, if we wanted someone's phone number, okay? But all those things are just part of constructive discipline. And here's what it looks like: doing the difficult stuff that we may not feel like doing, but we do it anyway so we can grow up in our faith. But then there is this corrective discipline. And this is what we see God doing with Jacob. Chuck Swindoll says it like this. He says it's kind of like the early days in his Marine Corps boot camp. He goes, it was really difficult because the instructor had to take a ragtag bunch of young men from every background and shred their self-sufficient arrogance, independent spirits, and rebellious tendencies. Okay? And he realized this: any indifference towards authority was replaced by a firm commitment to do only as he was told, regardless of the situation. And see, I think that's where God is trying to get us. Like, read the Bible, do what I say, just obey me, whether you like it or not. And I think that's the point to this. Chuck says this about both kinds of discipline. He says, constructive discipline involves teaching us how to do the difficult stuff. Corrective discipline removes bad attitudes and behaviors to make way for the good. But these two types of disciplines are always meant to work together, like two hands fashioning a lump of clay on a potter's wheel. In fact, after several weeks of cutting us new recruits down to size, the U.S. Marine Corps built us up bigger and stronger than we had ever been in our lives. With one hand, they tore us down. With the other, they put us back together. And that is what God wants to do with us. But here's what we know. Any discipline for the moment is painful. But his goal is to get rid of our self-sufficient, selfish, and all about me attitudes. And so for Jacob, this whole wrestling match and his hip going out, that was considered probably corrective discipline. But I don't know in Jacob's life how much correction it really did. Because Jacob just does what Jacob wants to do. And it's this weird reminder that sometimes we think if God would just show up to me and have a wrestling match with me or show up when I'm eating breakfast in the morning, I would always follow him and do what he wants. But we see Jacob has a wrestling match with God and he still doesn't get it. It's so shocking. So let's pick up our story and you'll see why Leah is going to be probably really mad at Jacob. But Rachel and Leah were Jacob's wives, all right? They were actually sisters. And then there were two maids that were, Jacob's baby mamas. None of this came about because of Jacob. He didn't want this. We'll look at this family tree right here. The only thing he wanted was Rachel, the woman up there, I think you're right. Rachel was the love of his life. But Rachel's sister on the other side was Leah. Okay, Leah. The problem is that Leah was older, and so Rachel and Leah's dad switched them on the wedding night, unbeknownst to Jacob. So he consumes the marriage with Leah and not with Rachel, and it throws just chaotic dysfunction into this family. So what's happening here is Rachel is the love of his life, but she can't have kids. But we saw in the last couple lessons ago that God opened her womb and she finally had a son. His name was Joseph. Now, Benjamin, the other son on there, hasn't been born yet. But Leah has all these kids. And then Rachel gives her maid Bilhah to Jacob to sleep with. And Leah gives Zilpah her maid to sleep with, and all these kids are being produced. So, but here's what Jacob does that I think is so heartbreaking for all of these women except for Rachel, okay? So Jacob is waiting for his brother to show up. And he's afraid because Esau's coming with 400 men. And Jacob doesn't know why. So he's kind of terrified. But look at Genesis 33. We'll pick it up in verse 1. Then Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids. Now, after the wrestling match, you and I would feel so much better if this is what Jacob said. Jacob lifted up his eyes, trusted God for protection, stood his ground in faith. But nope, that's not Jacob. He did not do that. Instead, he adds more to this original plan of separating his people. Look at verse 2. He put the maids and their children in front. Like, these are his children. And then he puts Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. In other words, he puts the children of the maids, which would be Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher, like on the front lines. Like if you're going to go to war, go to battle, and you've got the front lines, it's like, yep, they get killed first, whatever. Like that's what he was doing. And then he took all the children from Leah and he put them next. So they could maybe sort of get away if they killed the first group first. And then he puts Rachel, the love of his life, and little baby Joseph last so she could run away and be saved if that's the way it is. But how in the world would that make you feel if your dad did that to you? I mean, let's say you were one of the sons, of the maids, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, or Dan, and this went south. Automatically you are not that important to your dad. You know that. You're like, well, Dad doesn't love me as much as he loves Leah's kids, and he certainly doesn't love me as much as Rachel's kid. And this scene just is so heartbreaking for everyone involved. And it makes sense why 10 of these boys will eventually hate the baby Joseph so much that they will sell him off into slavery and lie to their dad and say he died. Okay, and Joseph will end up in Egypt. But it's this whole thing. Why wouldn't they? They hate him. Starting with this scene right here. And it's this reminder of what happens when someone is in a crisis. Warren Wiersbe said this: a crisis doesn't make a man, but it shows what a man is made of. This crisis shows us that Jacob is not a man of God at all. He doesn't trust God. He just does things on his own. But for us, when we have a crisis in our life, it really shows us what we believe about God. Do we trust him? Do we fall apart? Do we become anxious, fearful? Or do we just say, God, my life is yours. I trust whatever you do in it. See, Jacob should have put all of his family together in one big pot and just trusted God to take care of them all. But no, Jacob has to separate them all out for who he likes the best. And then Esau shows up. Verse 3. But he himself passed on ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. And what happened, I think, completely shocked Jacob. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. What a beautiful scene. It's been 20 years, and Esau didn't want to kill his brother. He was so happy to see him. But I laugh. Think of this. These guys are almost 100 years old. Jacob left at 77. It's been 20 years. So you're talking he's 97 years old, and he's running to his brother. I don't think I'm running anywhere when I'm 97 years old. Someone put this on Facebook once. It made me laugh. I never run with scissors, okay? Those last 2 words were unnecessary. In other words, I never run ever, okay? So that's my life. Rob and I are trying to walk more. So we got this app on our phones so that, and each one of us have it. So I spend most of my days sitting behind a desk because I have to study. So Rob was walking one day and he came in at the end of the day and he's like, look at my iPhone. He goes, I walked 4,000 steps today. And I looked at mine and I was like, I walked 450 steps today. And I said, if I run down the driveway, do I get double points if I'm actually running? And he just rolls his eyes like, yeah, I don't think so. He went walking this morning because I had to videotape this. And I asked him if he could take my phone. So my phone would get the walking steps on it. And then that would make me feel better because then I would think that was actually my steps. But anyway, there's that. So Jacob is probably thinking to himself, well, heck. If I had known my brother was going to love me, I wouldn't have given up 550 animals to, remember he was sending the animals ahead of time because he was so fearful that he was trying to appease his brother. But remember, sending those gifts, that was Jacob's plan, not God's. By not waiting, not trusting God, it was hugely costly for Jacob. And it's just a reminder, we do the same thing. Okay, things cost us so much more when we don't trust God. Verse 5, he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, who are these with you? So he, Jacob, said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maids came near with their children and they bowed down. Leah likewise came near with her children and they bowed down. And afterwards Joseph came near with Rachel and they bowed down. So Esau meets everyone and says this. Verse 8, and he said, what do you mean by all this company which I've met? In other words, what is the deal with all the servants and the 550 animals? And his reply was, to find favor in the sight of my Lord, which is code for, you scared me to death, okay? I didn't know if you were going to kill me or my family. Kind of like people on this plane who were scared. This pilot, he landed the plane, but it was a really, really bad landing, and everyone on board was afraid they were going to die. So they got off the airplane, and the airline's policy was that the pilot had to stand, and wave goodbye to everyone. Thank you for coming on our airline. So he had to stand out front as people were walking by. He said everyone was nice about it, except one little old lady at the very back of the plane. She comes off, and the landing was so bad, she was terrified. But she looked at the pilot, and she said, I have one question for you. She said, did we land, or were we shot down? I love that. Which takes me back to this point. Why in the world was Jacob afraid of anything? Why was he afraid of his brother? God had given him promises. I promise your descendants. I promise you will have the land. I promise. And Jacob had nothing to be afraid of. but he just stopped taking God at his word. And sometimes I wonder if we do the same thing. If we could just understand that God's promises are true for us today, we would go through this life less fearful, less anxious, and with just peace. And that's what God wants for us. But I love what Esau says to him. Verse 9, but Esau said, I have plenty, my brother. Let you have be your own. Let what you have be your own. And he's like, Jacob, I got my own stuff, okay? I don't need your animals. But Jacob said this in verse 10, no, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one who sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Jacob's like, no, you didn't kill me. Take the animals, all right? Verse 11, please take my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty. Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then it goes weird. And I'm not even sure what Esau was thinking, like, hey, let's be bros again, all right? Come, let's live by each other. Let's just be friends. Now, I'm going to show you a picture here. I showed you this earlier. As you can kind of see, Jacob needs to be, his homeland is to the left of the Dead Sea on the bottom. He needs to get back there to Beersheba or Bethel or Hebron. That's the place that God is saying you need to go to. But instead, Esau is on the east side of the Dead Sea. And that's not where God wants Jacob. So I don't know what Jacob's thinking at this point. Here's a picture here so you can kind of see. This is the countries. You see Turkey at the top and then Syria. And then right below Syria to the very, very left is that strip, and that's Israel. And then to the right of that is Jordan. Now, Esau's land is in Jordan, and Jacob, where Jacob's supposed to be, is actually in Israel. Verse 12 says this, Then Esau said, let us take our journey and go, and I will go before you. In other words, hey, you're going to follow me, and we're going to go into my land. Now, who knows? Maybe he thinks you're going to follow me and then cut across and get to Dad's land, where you're supposed to be. Nobody knows. Maybe it freaked out Jacob. Possibly. Maybe after spending time with his brother, he's like, oh, I remember what this was like, and I really don't want to have anything to do with him. Verse 13, but he, Jacob, said to him, my Lord knows that the children are frail and that the flocks and herds which are nursing are a care to me. And if they are driven hard one day, all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord pass on before his servant, and I will proceed at my leisure, according to the pace of the cattle that are before me, and according to the pace of the children. And that makes sense. Esau has 400 men. They didn't have children and lambs and things like that to worry about. So they could go faster than Jacob could with all of these kids. But then Jacob says this, until I come to my Lord at Seir. Seir is in Jordan. That's over on the right side. I'll put that map back up again. Seir, look at where it is. At the very, very bottom of the east side of the Dead Sea. And Jacob tells Esau that he's going to meet him there. And Jacob's like, hey, bro, I'm right behind you. And so it sounds like there was this plan to follow Esau back to his homeland, but it's not where God was calling him to be. Okay? He needs him back over on the west side of the Dead Sea, in Israel, his homeland. Verse 15, Esau said, please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. Esau's being so gracious. Let some of my men help you. But Jacob said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But here's the weird part. Jacob doesn't go that way. I don't know why did he tell his brother that, hey, bro, I'm right behind you. Jacob doesn't go south. Jacob goes west. And look at what it says in verse 17. Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built for himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the place is named Succoth. He does not go down to his brother. He takes a turn, okay? That's not his plan. So what happens is Jacob settles in Succoth for a little while. The Bible doesn't tell us why. It doesn't tell us why Jacob did this. Now, we can give Jacob the benefit of the doubt, which I usually don't, okay, because he drives me nuts most of the time. But maybe he really did intend to follow Esau to Seir. But maybe it's not recorded, but maybe God said, no, Jacob, you're not to go that way. Maybe the weather was bad. Maybe the kids got sick. Maybe the flocks got sick. Maybe Esau scared him to death and Jacob's like, I'm not going down there with him. Maybe Jacob wasn't lying. Maybe there was something unforeseen that happened that, that he sent a messenger on to his brother and was like, hey bro, I can't make it, this and this and this happened. Or maybe Jacob just lied to him. Like, we just don't know. The Bible it's pretty silent on it. So Jacob goes his way and Esau goes his. And we would assume that Jacob would just, Sukkoth would be a stop along the way, and then they would just head on down to Bethel and then go back to Hebron or Beersheba and see his father, because his mom was probably dead by now. But Isaac's his dad and he's still alive. But maybe, and I don't know, these are all maybes, maybe seeing Esau reminded him of his past. And maybe he remembered the turmoil with his dad and how his dad loved Esau and not really him. And now his mom's dead, and maybe he's just like, you know what, I'm just going to take a breather. Okay, I'm just going to stay in Sukkoth for a while. But then we see him move again. And he moves even a little bit farther west to a place called Shechem. Okay? Now, this was a really bad idea on Jacob's part, because Jacob's supposed to be down loving God and building his faith, but instead he stops and buys land in Shechem. And this is a wicked Canaanite town. Jacob should have known better not to take his family at this particular place. It's like, remember when we studied Lot and Lot moved to Sodom, okay? The bright lights of Sodom were calling him. And I always said, well, maybe there was a good Costco there, or maybe there was, a good Chick-fil-A, I don't know. But maybe Jacob was just tired of living this nomadic life, and so now it's like a city, a big city. Maybe he wanted some comforts. So he moves right to the edge of Shechem. And it's just a reminder to us that when we want to move jobs, move locations, move neighborhoods, move cities or towns, the first question we should ask is not, is it cheaper? Do they have good restaurants? Good gym, good Pilates classes, good bike trails, good grocery stores? That shouldn't be our first question. As a follower of Jesus, our first question should be, is there a good church? Can my kids find good Christian friends? Can we get involved with, is it a neighborhood where we can get involved and share our faith in Christ? I mean, that's what it is. With the ultimate prayer being, God, is this where you want us? Can we serve you best here? Because that's what followers of Jesus are supposed to do. But Jacob did not do that. Verse 18, now Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came to Padan Aram and camped before the city. He bought the piece of land where he pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. He's not just visiting, now he's going to settle down and buy some land. But here's the thing. God did not tell Jacob to stop along the way. God told him, you got some land going on, and this isn't part of it. Shechem was not his native land. Bethel, Hebron, Beersheba down south, that was his native land. So in a sense, Jacob is living in complete disobedience. But watch what he does, and I think we're going to see something here. Verse 20, then he erected there an altar and called it El Eloho Israel. And you're like, what? You're somewhere where you're not supposed to be, and you're living in a wicked town, and you're not promoting God, but you put up a little altar because you think that God's going to be okay with that. And I started thinking, I kind of think we do the same thing. Some people are saying, well, I'm a Christian, I go to church, but we're living in lifestyles that God completely disapproves us of. We're going out and getting drunk on the weekends. We're having the affair. We're gossiping. We're bitter. We're angry. But, you say, but look on my Facebook page. Look at that. I tell you in my about me that I'm a Christian, okay? Hey, look at my page, because there's a picture of me there. Like, I checked in at my church. I mean, see me there at my church, but that's right below the picture of where you were drunk at the party the night before. And people are just like, what? Okay? And if that's you, here's what you need to know. That makes God sick, okay? I'm so sorry to tell you that, but as followers of Jesus, we have to be different. We have to be a light to the surrounding nations, the surrounding world, the surrounding neighborhoods. And we can't do that if we bought into the culture and we're starting to look just like our worldly friends. Because remember what Jesus said, if you love me, you will obey what I command. John 14:15. But here's what's weird, is like, what does Jesus say? Love God with all your heart and soul and mind. And then love others. That's the greatest commandment, to love God first, not love the alcohol and the parties and the drinking and all of those kind of things. Love God first. And so what happens is Jacob does a lot what we do. We're just kind of sitting on the fence with this God thing. It's like a little God, a lot more about me. A little God, a lot more about me. Now, for Jacob, it's like, I'm not going back to my native land, even though God pretty much told me I should. But I'm going to build an altar to at least show others, that I believe in God. And that should be enough for God. But here's what we learn in the Bible. It's not. Okay, and we got to get that. Jesus says this himself in to John in the book of Revelation. Jesus is like, write the church of Laodicea a letter. And it says this in verse 14, to the angel of the church in Laodicea, write this. These are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. In other words, Jesus saying, this is from me, okay? Verse 15 says, I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. That's terrifying. God's like, I need 100% people on board with following me. That's what Jesus' heart is. He's like, follow me. Stop with all the sin and all the goofy stuff you guys are doing. Let's do this and persevere to the end and be witnesses like you're supposed to. But the lukewarm thing seems to be Jacob's story, and it might be yours. You may say, you know what? I grew up as a Christian. I went to church camp. I hung out with Christian friends. I was taught to read my Bible. I had this strong faith. Then I went to college. It's kind of my story. I never found a church. Stopped reading my Bible. Got a new set of friends. Wanted nothing to do with God. Okay? And for some of you, you get that. And then we all end up doing things that we probably shouldn't have. And maybe your story is this, and you say this, one day, you knew, one day I would come back to my faith. Just like one day, Jacob would be like, one day I'll go back to Hebron and Beersheba and see my dad. One day. But just not now. Kind of having too much fun. But here's what you're going to learn, which is what Jacob is going to learn. That since you didn't come back to Jesus sooner, or since he didn't come back to his faith, you probably would say this to me. You know, Lisa, because I didn't come back sooner, my life is a mess. I had the abortion. I married someone I shouldn't have. I drank too much. I started doing drugs. I had the affair. I literally blew up my family. And I can trace all of it to the day that I decided that one day I would come back to my faith. And for Jacob, this is him. He should be heading to Bethel, to Beersheba. A place of faith for him. That was his homeland. And the thing about Jacob is Jacob had this amazing encounter with God 20 years ago. Remember, like we call it Jacob's ladder. He dreamed of the ladder, angels ascending and descending, and God was at the top. Like, we get that. And he understands that the promised land is there. That's where he should be going. But we see he's living like this. One day I will come back to my faith. One day. But Jacob had what a lot of people don't. And not only did God promise him a future, but he had a past. He had a past legacy, something that God was passing down to him. It's like, think about that. The great father of faith, Abraham, was his grandfather. Isaac's his father. These were patriarchs. That Jacob's name would be added to that list. This is something he should have been like, I got to live up to this. It's kind of like being a preacher's kid. I got to live up to the name of my family who loves God. We see God talking to Moses in Exodus 3:6. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. But Jacob, for as much as God had shown up in his life, Jacob did some of the dumbest things. And he wasn't really ever living up to that legacy, which is a reminder that we can do really dumb things too. But when we do, as followers of Jesus, here's what we need to remember. There are always consequences. There was a farmer, he plowed hard for days with an ox and a mule yoked together. The ox told the mule one day, he said, you know what, let's play sick tomorrow. He said, I just need a rest. The mule said, no, I can't do that. We have to get this work done. The season's short. But the ox played sick, and the farmer brought him hay and corn and made him comfortable. When the mule came back from plowing, the ox asked how things had gone. The mule said, well, without you, we didn't get much done today, but it's okay. The ox said, did the old man say anything about me? The mule said, nope, nothing. The next day, the ox decided to play sick again. When the tired mule came in that afternoon, he said, how'd you do today? And he said, well, we didn't get much done without you. And the ox said, well, what did the old man say about me? And the mule said, well, nothing directly. He said, but I did overhear him having a long talk with a butcher. There you go. Lots of consequences. So the story of Jacob reminds us that we need to be very, very careful and not walk away from our faith for any length of time. All right? Let's pick it up in verse 18, Genesis 33:18. After Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. Now, remember, the people that he's around now are godless people. They worshipped idols. They did not believe in the one true God. And Jacob pitches a tent, all right, with all of his wives and his children in this godless town. I don't know why he didn't think these people are going to infiltrate and affect my family. And Jacob's kind of like this father, whatever my kids want to do, that's just fine with me. Here's a funny Skit Guys video, things dads never say. This kind of reminds me of what Jacob would be like. Watch this.
I don't care how late you stay out. Stay out as late as you want. You want to borrow the new car? You want to borrow my credit card? Kids today, they really have it rough.
I have no idea where we are or where we're going.
I mean, when I was their age, life was easy, super easy. Why haven't you gotten a tattoo yet? How come you don't have any piercings yet?
Yep, we're lost. We are completely lost.
Ooh, sports.
Just do whatever the mechanic says to do.
Vehicle maintenance is completely overrated.
Look, whatever the mechanic is asking, just pay him. Pay him whatever he wants.
I wish they had soap operas at night. I like that boy. You should date him. You should date him immediately.
Well, what about the creepy guy with the motorcycle? He's cute.
Yeah, sure. Spring break in Tahiti sounds fun. Hey, make sure you get all your video games done before you start your homework. You don't have to pass all your classes.
What? You have a project due tomorrow and you've known about it for 4 weeks and you haven't started yet? Sweet!
Doesn't anybody want to know if we're there yet?
Remember, if you need anything between midnight and 4 a.m., please come wake me up. Hey, I'm on the phone. Could you bring the baby over and let him climb all over me?
Hey, can you please turn that music up?
Well, we just stopped for lunch 10 minutes ago, but yeah, let's stop again. I never have trouble with my toddler.
I never have trouble with my teenagers.
I never have trouble with my adult children.
You know, she's right. We are ruining her life. Yes, more homework to correct.
All right, whining.
Yay, tantrums. Vomit.
We just really need to spoil these kids more.
Sorry, buddy. I don't know any good jokes at all. You're 16. You pretty much know everything now. I think 18's a great age to get married.
Okay, remember, make sure you turn on all the lights before you leave the house.
Hey, could you leave the front door open for a couple hours? Thanks.
Whoa! Money really does grow on trees.
So Jacob has pitched his tent, and it's a reminder to us that it is a slow fade. But in his mind, he's sort of in the land that God has promised, but not really. You know, it started making me think about how easy that is for us to do the same thing. I'm sort of following Jesus. Like, I show up on Sundays, but then I kind of do my own thing Monday through Saturday. And we try to mix the two together, and we think like, oh, God's fine with it. He isn't. Please know that. He isn't. He wants us all in. That's what his goal is for us. Not part, all. Not one day a week, every day of the week. And the sad part is Jacob knew better. He knew that he should be going back home. So he stops along the way, and here's where the trouble begins in Genesis 34. Verse 1, now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had been born to Jacob. We'll look at our family tree. There's Leah on the left. She had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and one daughter, Dinah. Imagine being the baby little girl with all those brothers. So now Dinah, the daughter of Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. Now at this point, like I said, Dinah's the only daughter, and she's probably around 13-ish because girls were actually getting married that young back then. We know nothing about her, nothing. Like, is she overly protected because she's the baby girl of the family? Is she tired of that? Does she want to just go be a wild child because she's sick of her family and her brothers? Or is she naive? Is she sheltered? Has she ever had a boyfriend? Like, we don't know anything about her. But for some reason, she wants to go to this wicked city, Canaan, a Canaanite city in Shechem, and it seems like nobody's with her. Why does Leah and Jacob let her do this? Maybe they didn't know. Maybe she snuck out at night. Like, we just don't know. Maybe they didn't think it was that big of a deal. But as parents, we're supposed to protect our children. I was talking to some of our kids the other day. It was so funny. Their kids are now getting older, like teenager older. And they're like, this is the hardest thing we've ever done. And I just laughed because Rob and I are empty nesters now. It's like, yay, best day ever. But they're saying, I don't know what to do with these kids. Like, they want all this freedom, and then we say no, and then they hate us, and we're like the bad guys. And I was laughing, and I'm like, yeah, welcome to parenting. I go, parenting is hard. They'll kind of figure it out when they're 25. Until then, you're always going to be the bad guy, so just plan on it, okay? But I started reminding them of when they were younger and how much they didn't like us, all right? For the girls, they would come home and they'd be like, oh, I just love this guy, and he's so cute, and I'm just so excited. And Rob and I would meet the guy, and we'd be like, absolutely not, you're not dating him. And here's their response, well, that's not fair. You just don't know our relationship. We're like, sorry, not happening. I hate you, you're the worst parents ever. Okay, you'll get over it. One of the girls was dating a guy. He was so bad for her. And we said no, and she went behind our back and started seeing him anyway. We were so shocked because that wasn't like her. But we found out and shut that off, and she was so mad at us, like I can't even tell you. But many years later, she saw him, and she saw what a mess his life turned out to be. And she came to us and she said, thank you so much for protecting me from this person. So one time we had to tell one of our sons, had a girlfriend, longtime girlfriend, but he wanted to go away to college in Chicago to Wheaton. And we're like, you got to break up with the girlfriend. Like, we're not going to do this. My heart is in Phoenix because Wheaton's cost a lot of money. And you're trying to play football. So it's like, you're going to have to take a 4-year break and go to college, or stay here and go to college. Like, we don't care, but we just can't have that back and forth, and I'm miserable and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not fair. How could you ask that of me? Well, you know, and he came back, and 4 years later, and they're married today. It's the cutest thing ever. But it was good for him to have that break. They both say that was the best thing that happened to them. We had to tell one of our kids, no, you can't go to Vegas with your friends during COVID, okay? Well, that's not fair. No, you can't go to that party. Well, that's not fair. Here's your curfew. Don't be late, okay? Nothing happens good after midnight. We had one, wow, let's add the wow into that. Well, that's not fair. My friends, don't have a curfew. So we do. One time, one of our boys told us that his friend started smoking pot. Now, this was before pot was even legalized. So we promptly invited his friend over and sat him down along with our son and said, if you want to hang out with our son, you will not smoke pot. End of story. Now, if you want to smoke pot, that's great. You can't be friends with our child. That's just the way it is. And his friend decided to smoke pot, and our son never was friends with him again, all right? So some of you are like, what? You can do that? And the answer is yes, you can. And you don't want to get legalistic, and I'm not talking about legalistic and, well, you can't do this because the Bible says it. No, this is just common sense with your children, all right? You don't want to be overly to where you don't let them go do things and have fun, and you don't want to do that because that'll turn them away from God and you. But really, let's think this through. Is going to a party or Vegas or dating someone who's not a Christian, are those good, solid things for you? So have a conversation. But here's what happens is, in order for this to work, you have to do what you say. And you can't be like this cute little Skit Guys video where you're telling your kids, do as I say, not as I do. You need to be able to do the right things so your kids are seeing you. Watch this, it's funny.
Hey, sleepyhead, wake up.
Wake up, baby. You wake up.
Call him baby. He's a teenager.
You'll always be mommy's baby.
You won't. Listen, here. You've been on the couch, you've been playing your PX7 and your Nintendo or whatever it is, all right? But we needed to have a little talk, all right?
Just a little talk.
Little family talk.
Want to nip some things in the bud before that. Don't you roll your eyes at me, young man.
How many times have I told you not to do that?
We can make this easy or we can make it hard. It's your choice.
Look, all right, there's some things we need to go over because it's essentially like this. Don't do as we do as we're about to say.
Yes, do as we say, not as we do.
I typed up some family values for you that you need to have before you head out the door, which I thank the Lord, is going to be sooner than later.
He doesn't mean that.
I do mean that. I said it. I mean that.
Stay as long as you need to.
The first thing to help you in life is the company that you keep. You need good friends with good moral character.
Your father is right. We are kind of concerned about some of your friends. They don't have the best character. I think you might want to just check those things out.
What did you just say to us? What about our friends? All right, they're trashy. Yeah, they're trashy.
They are.
Yeah.
Our friends are trash.
Yeah, but we've known them since college.
You don't throw
you can't
lifelong
throw them
friends
away.
out like that.
You can't throw them away.
We want to try to fix them.
We're trying to help you. Do as we say.
Not as we do.
The next thing is money, all right?
You need to watch your money. You are spinning it like it's growing on trees, it's not.
He has no money. He
has
no money.
what we give him.
That's got to stop at some point.
You need to be more responsible with your money, young man.
You need to get off that couch and go get a job. But hear me on this. Money is the root of all evil, and that's why we have none. We have credit up to our eyeballs, but we have no money.
Mitchie, hurry it up. I want to go to the casino.
All right. The last thing is, there's a whole list of things, but I could go down smoking. Go ahead. Tell me about smoking.
Do not smoke. It will... I know I smoke, but if I could go back and never start, I wouldn't. I'm trying to stop. I've got 5 patches on right now.
It's like kissing an ashtray. Listen to me. Stop the smoking, all right? It'll just ruin everything, okay? If I could have my aunt come back from the dead, she would tell you, stop smoking.
Kissing an ashtray? You're one to talk. Why don't you brush occasionally?
All right. Son, if we could sum it all up for you in a nice little nutshell, it's just this. Do as we say.
Not as we do.
All right. I'm gonna go get a cold one.
Get me one. And you know what? Let's just go to the casino.
So all that to say that Jacob and Leah should have protected Dinah. Not just let her go do whatever she wanted to do. So Dinah goes into the city, and look what the guy who sold her dad some property did. Okay? Verse 2, when Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, so Hamor's the dad, Shechem is the son, just happens to have the same name as the town. Look what he said. He saw her, took her, and violated her. In other words, he raped her. How? I don't took her in the backseat of his like chariot. I don't know. However this played out, he violated her. But Shechem didn't really look at it this way because as weird as this sounds, he thinks he loves her. All right, look at verse 3. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. And he probably wasn't expecting that. Now, maybe this was Dinah's first encounter with a guy, gave her attention. Maybe she loved the attention. Maybe Shechem really loved her. Maybe she was terrified. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say. So Shechem, the rapist, goes to his father Hamor, the king of the town, with a demand. Verse 4. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." Verse 5. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the field with his livestock. So he kept quiet about it until they came home. You're like, what? Like you would think if you were a dad and you just heard your daughter had been raped, there would be some serious repercussions there. You would think he would go straight to Hamor, straight to Shechem, but he doesn't. And I can't imagine how Dinah had to have felt about this, but in reality, all of Leah's kids, remember that scene about separating the families? They had to have felt like their dad didn't love them anyway. So Jacob doesn't do anything until his 10 sons come home. Verse 6. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. It's probably a small town. People talk. They probably knew what was going on. This rape thing was probably big news. Verse 7, now Jacob's sons had come from the fields. As soon as they heard what had happened, they were filled with grief and fury because Shechem had done a great disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor tries to explain, this wasn't rape. My son loves your daughter. Okay? Look at verse 8. But Hamor said to them, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourself. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, acquire property in it. In other words, let's make a deal. We know we don't really believe in your God and we may not really understand it, but that shouldn't matter that much. Like we can make this work. My son can marry your daughter and your sons can marry our daughters and we can be just one big happy family. And as sad as that sounds, Christians do the exact same thing today. We hear it all the time. Well, we've been dating and he promises that after we get married, he'll go to church with me. No, he won't. Okay, just know that. Well, he isn't really a Christian, but he says he believes in God. Okay, that should be good enough. It's not. Well, he's really a nice guy. Like, that should count for something. It doesn't. Well, he grew up in a different religion. But all roads lead to God. No, they don't. All right, we hear that all the time. This is just the Jewish version of it, okay? So Shechem apparently shows up and has a conversation with Jacob and the boys. Verse 11, then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Now, what we don't see is an apology. I'm so sorry I offended your family. I'm so sorry that I offended your daughter. I'm just so sorry what I did was wrong. We don't see that. But instead, Dinah feels like she's on that show, Let's Make a Deal. Verse 12. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the girl as my wife. Now, there seemed to be a little honor there. I'll pay you whatever. I really do love her. But the sons, the 10 sons, are not going to let him get away with this. And unbeknownst to Jacob or anyone else, they come up with a plan. And for some reason, it doesn't seem like Jacob is around when the kids decide this. Look at verse 13. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, we can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will give our consent to you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go. Lies, deception, kind of as a reminder of what Jacob did all of those years. And I always say, apparently the apple did not fall very far from the tree. So for them, the deception was you need to be circumcised. I always think, ouch, okay, that sounds like it would hurt. But Shechem didn't know anything about Jacob's God. And so when they say, this is our final offer, you have to do it, they're just like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. But what we don't see is any mention of God, any godly response at all. And because I think Jacob did not take his faith serious. And because Jacob did not take his faith serious, neither did his children. So we're going to end here today. But just so you know, it's going to go really bad for Jacob next week, because we're going to see that a couple of his boys will go on a murderous rampage on this town. And I think it stems from Jacob never being a fully devoted follower of God. It stems from Jacob living this half-hearted, sort of following God life. And I think that that's a lesson for all of us today. To say, God, I want to love you with all of my heart and soul and mind. And if today's the day, like maybe your first day watching Bible study or back to Bible study, please make today the day that you seriously surrender. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to make decisions like Jacob has made, and it devastated people around him, and it will devastate people around you. And what we keep seeing with Jacob is that there's always consequences for not doing things God's way. Because trust me, his way is always the best. I hope that helps you today. See you next week. Have a good week.